It was a storm for the ages. Tuesday's massive rainfall caused dangerous flooding on the DVP and the Gardiner and shut down parts of the TTC. It essentially brought the city to a soaking wet halt. Joining me now to talk about the flooding and what the city needs to do to solve this major issue is U of T professor Matti Siemiatycki. Matti, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Faiza.
And I should also mention you're the director of the Infrastructure Institute at U of T. I want to get started with this weather event that so many people are speaking about days later. What is the biggest issue for the city when it comes to these sorts of impacts?
This weather event was epic. We got a month's worth of rain in a few hours, and it overwhelmed our capacity to retain water and to move it through the urban system and out away from the city. And really, it just overwhelmed many parts of town, and people experienced it. One of the things that's also so interesting is as it passed through, that we did rebound, and the next day people could move around the city. So this is a story about huge impact and devastating causes and consequences on people's lives, but also the definition of resilience and what it means for a city to bounce back, but also the devastating impacts on people's basements and on public property that's left behind.
You really saw so many people coming together in the city, including our emergency officials who had to deal with an increase of calls. The big question, Matti, is now, how did things get so bad in such little time? What are some things the city can do in the short term and in the long term to guard against these types of catastrophes?
In the short term, we need to focus essentially on programming and services. How do we tell people where they should go and where is unsafe, and what types of emergency responses? Emergency responders were getting hundreds of calls of people who are in jeopardy, and that puts our emergency responders at risk too. So we need to be able to communicate much quicker, and we need a plan for rain. We have plans for heat, we have plans for cold, we have plans for snow and wind. We're going to need major plans for rain and what to do during a rainstorm and immediately after. Do we send people who are at work home at that time? Do we shelter in place? What do we do? Because it's the longer term solution is around infrastructure. It's around providing better ways to move water, to store water in certain places, like in large tanks that are being built. And there's currently some sewer and outflow projects being done right now. But also, how do we make our city more permeable so the water can rest in place and doesn't have to spread over land and often end up in people's basements and on our transportation system. So this is both a program question that we can bring in the short term and also an infrastructure solution that's going to be required over the longer period of time.
And there have been some added pressures on officials to really address these issues and be able to respond to them in real time here. But Matti, I just want to switch gears a little bit, talk about another major issue for the city, which is gridlock. When it comes to construction projects, especially, can the city do a more effective job rolling out these projects?
I feel like these stories are interconnected. It's a story of our infrastructure aging, of our infrastructure being out of sight, out of mind until something breaks. And so with the flooding, it was a major rain event. And now with congestion, it's something that's built up over time, and people's frustration level, and they're noticing. It's almost like it's boring till it's broken. And now we're realizing that it is just so hard to get around our city. These construction projects that, for example, on the Gardiner, which is scheduled for 3 years, has just brought parts of downtown to a gridlock and made it so hard for people to come into the city. And you're seeing surveys where respondents are telling the surveyors that they might both consider not coming into town for events or for work, and also in some cases they'd look to leave the city. This is hugely consequential. We need to find ways to speed up this construction and to really get a handle on the congestion that's starting to strangle Toronto.
There's also been some criticism when it comes to how the city plans for these projects, and I'm talking about the Gardiner construction there, but also the 510 Spadina, that work, which is paused right now. And so the streetcar not operating currently as work is underway, and buses are now operating. So that's adding to the gridlock along that stretch of the route here. And the criticism is that the TTC and the city during these projects have the ability to plan ahead for these for this work here. Do you think that the city is being proactive when it comes to rolling out these projects? Is there something that they could do ahead of time, perhaps anticipate this gridlock would impact motorists?
What you're seeing right now is congestion everywhere all at once. And the impact on that is that there's no other alternatives. And there's not just no other alternatives for people who are driving, but also for people who are taking public transit. And so often parallel routes are closed off, or public transit that might be an alternative is also not viable or available. So we really need much better coordination. The city needs a command post that coordinates all the construction. We need to keep in mind this construction is critically necessary. Some of this construction is actually the floodproofing that's going to help our city. Other construction is to keep the infrastructure in a state of good repair. So it's critically necessary, but it has to be done efficiently and it has to be coordinated. And right now, just the scale of it across the city makes it feel for Torontonians like there's no way to get around. There's no viable alternatives, and it's leading to frustration and even a lost economic productivity and people saying this could be the final straw and they might look to leave.
Yeah, it seems like it is having a great impact on many Torontonians and many living in and across the GTA. Matti Siemiatycki, Director of the Infrastructure Institute at the University of Toronto, we thank you for your time.